my now retired business partner, who is, the head composer for this company for years and years and years, he put that perfectly. And he said, I remember he talked to a young composer. He said, look, at the end of the day, it's the difference between art and craft. He said, when you're making your own music and you're doing your own thing, it's art. It's art for you. You're the artist and you're making it, and you can make it whatever you want. But when you're making something for a brand, it's a craft. You're being hired to make a specific thing.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. Here's the second part of my conversation with Jack Bradley.
How does it change when you're doing something specifically for a brand rather than just making a piece of music for people to listen to? Like, what's the difference there?
Well, the difference there, and my composers could speak to this more, but I can definitely speak to it because we talk about this a lot. Mm-hmm. And my now retired business partner, who is, the head composer for this company for years and years and years, he put that perfectly. And he said, I remember he talked to a young composer. He said, look, at the end of the day, it's the difference between art and craft. He said, when you're making your own music and you're doing your own thing, it's art. It's art for you. You're the artist and you're making it, and you can make it whatever you want. But when you're making something for a brand, it's a craft. You're being hired to make a specific thing. You need to bring your art into that, but at the end of the day, they're going to approve it and they're going to tell you what they want. You can always fight back on that, but it's not a great idea. So, he would always try to teach that difference between the art and the craft. It's like, well, it would be like if somebody hired a furniture artist who makes their own thing, and maybe it goes into galleries and people are like, oh my God, it's amazing. Everything's a little off center. But if somebody comes to them and says, I'm going to pay you $20,000 to make me a bookshelf, that person is likely going to have some input, at least on that, right? Oh, I want it to be red because the rest of my room, okay, I wouldn't have chosen red. Well, it
needs to function as a bookshelf.
Right. Well, that's, first and foremost. Yeah. It needs to actually be able to work in theory. But, it's finding that balance because, when you, even just the constraints of the time, it just saying it's a 30, you can't give them a 37. You just can't. Like, it has to work within those 30 seconds. Are there scoring moments where it needs to hit certain things? If you're just writing for yourself, you don't think about that. You think, intro, chorus, verse, bridge, maybe, depending on what you're making. Like, there's so many different things. And even then you can be like, no, I just want to make a 3-minute intro. Okay. If that's what you're making for you, then make it. You want to make a 30-minute epic that just, has 3 chords.
You're going to be the only one that watches?
Right, exactly. You do you. That's fine.
Yeah.
But a client's going to tell you what they want.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. So there is a big difference. I'm curious about something too, because I've often talked with people who do audio branding, and they say that not often, but sometimes people will pay them for a whole audio brand and then they won't use it.
Yeah. Yeah, so that has happened, hasn't it?
Hopefully not a whole lot.
With us, but it's more like what I find more common by talking to so many people in other companies, but also my clients who sometimes work with other music companies and do other things. But I find that it's almost more common that they'll do it and they'll use it, but then after a month or two, they'll be like, people don't like it as much as we did, so we'll just get rid of it, or we'll stop using it, that happens, I think, more often than not. And I think that's just...
What numbers are they using to come to those decisions
I have
in
no
a month?
Idea. Everything is so data driven now that if they're not seeing their numbers go up in sales, they're not seeing their engagement go up. There's so many, data
Does that take time though?
I don't know.
When you think a sound, in order to become memorable, in order for people to remember it, would need more than a month?
You would think. But then here's the other thing. What if it's a a new CMO, chief marketing officer comes in 2 months in and is like, I hate that thing you did. I got to put my stamp on the brand now. So I'm going to start all over again. And that's pretty common. I mean, people the turnaround at that level is incredibly high.
So do they call you back or do they go to someone else?
Totally depends. It totally depends. 9 out of 10 times they're probably going to go to somebody else. If we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It's just that, that maybe the CMO might also come in and just fire the whole agency and hire a new agency. And that agency that they hire has like their favorite music company. So we're not going to get that call. There are hundreds and hundreds of us out there. So, every relationship is like a golden nugget, so you have to just do your best to hold on. But that happens all the time. I mean, and that can happen in any, not even just sonic branding, just projects in general, certain brands, it's, you're always
voices can be replaced all the time. Happens all the time.
Exactly.
So, wow. As far as the pandemic is concerned, because I mean, a lot of things changed around that time. How do you think sonic branding, audio branding changed during that time? Because it must have changed as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think that what changed, there's always like this leads to this, leads to this. I think certainly during the pandemic, I mean, the explosion in podcasts was, I don't need to tell you as we're
case in point.
On one right now.
Where are we?
It's that became so the idea of audio, and then TikTok, which was an audio first piece of entertainment. I mean, social media, but more so entertainment. I think that certainly changed the game because suddenly everybody was like, well, wait a minute. If audio is that much more engaging, why aren't we doing something audio? And I think the conversation came up, and then, brand managers get wind of it, and then they hear it at a conference or they read it in an article, and we need to have sonic branding. And so it really kind of blew up, and that's great. Although I would say most sonic branding is not great. I feel like one of the big problems is because so many people were doing it and throwing their hat in the ring, and who knows where the problem lies. And I guess it could be the people making it, but a lot of times I think it's the people that are asking for it don't know what they want. But I find that most sonic brands that are out there right now, even big ones, if I heard that without the logo, like if I just heard it out in the world, I would have no idea what it was.
They
I
do
really wouldn't.
say that if the name of the company is in the sonic logo, that you're more likely to remember
that's
it,
like
obviously,
that's like
but
the greatest trick ever. It's like, if you're going to do like what Liberty Mutual did, come on, like they just do it.
It's a no-brainer.
They say it like 45 times.
yeah.
But I think, or even like We Are Farmers, right? Like anything where the brand is in it. It's going to make a huge difference, but a lot of brands don't, and I think they're afraid of being, well, that's a little on the nose. It's too jingly. It's too whatever reason they decide that they just decide to do something very sound designy. A lot of the auto brands, right? Like Audi and Infiniti, they have these very sound design forward things. And I think that's fine. But I'm telling you right now, if you played me 5 of those right now, I'd be like, maybe that's this brand, like without seeing the logo or having somebody say, presented by, then I don't know that I would know what it is. And to me, that's a problem. Like you probably spent, I don't know, $100,000 or a couple of $100,000 on that sonic identity, because it's not a cheap process. And at the end of the day, you've got a 2-second piece of sound design that, I could just play for you right now, or a modification of that. So I think a lot of it is just how much thought is going into it and trying to understand it. And there's no real silver bullet. Every brand is going to be different. Every brand is going to approach it different. And I totally respect that. I mean, I did one recently where there was I thought that there should be a debate about whether the brand should be part of it, should be sung. But to them, it was no debate at all. It absolutely had to be sung. And, I think it worked out. I think it worked out well. I actually am really happy with the work, and they seem very happy with the work, and they are using it. But, you know, it's like you have to kind of decide, like, well, this was a tech company, but it's also a tech company that's really about people and interacting with people. So I do think voices are powerful and should be involved. Should they be singing it, though? Or should it just be, you know, something that's more of a melody, but it's not necessarily words? And, you know, these are all the things we talk about.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that go into that, I'm sure. But yeah, the idea that, the idea that someone would pay that much money to do one of these and then not use it is, really unfortunate because
I guess, I mean, although if I was the music company and I got paid $200,000 and they didn't use it, I mean,
it's
unless your
not
deal
your
was
problem.
Yeah, exactly. Unless your deal was set up that you were going to make the money on the back end of use, but in most cases it's not. Most cases the brands
paid up front.
They want to own it, you know. And I understand that because it's going to be on everything in theory,
of course.
And they don't want to keep track of it. They don't want to have to renew it. A lot of time, what we've started to do is do more 6-month or 1 year licenses or agreements with them, so that if things do go horribly bad, they didn't overpay for it. Hopefully they come back to us and we can do it, you know, again. But then the flip side of it, people do really love it and they want to keep it. Then we get more of a fair payment 6 months or a year down the line, because now they've had a chance to
how my voiceover works.
Test it out. Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it's basically
works
testing.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just seems like a month is not nearly long enough to decide
I agree.
whether or not, like, I can't even imagine paying that much money and then saying a month down the road, that wasn't working.
Some of those brands have so much money. You know, I mean, I think they do that with a lot of things, you know, that will never, you know, new products, new product design, you know, that stuff is not cheap either. You know, I mean, you think about Sonic Identity, you would think if they're going to change a logo or that's huge. You know, it's huge because it is their identity, literally. And design has become so important with the modern world where, you know, you're moving so fast that something catches your eye or something's appealing to you. That's worth the investment. And I would say the same thing about audio.
Definitely.
But it really is. It's about the brand. It's about the context, what they're trying to do.
I really appreciate you being here. Know anyone that you think would make a great guest for this podcast? Someone who works in sound on behalf of clients? Please do get in touch. I'd love to hear about them. Your recommendations are always super helpful. And now back to the show.
Yeah, it's just, it needs that consistent repetition before anyone's going to remember.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. If you hear it 3 times, you're probably not going to really be into it or recognize it. You know, I think that's why I keep coming back to, and I'm to be clear, I'm not trying to make fun of it. It's just way over the top with the Liberty Mutual, you know, mnemonic. And I know people that work there and they're incredible people, and the creative that they do is actually very, very good. You know, it just, you know, they just made that choice to be, it was almost like self-irony to be like, you know, liberty, 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 liberty. You know, so you're just like, wow, really? Like, but then when you do start to think about it, I mean, the recall is through the roof. So if you want to base it off of data, I mean, the recall, everybody's gonna be like, yep, I know what brand that is, you know, and then it and I think that kind of took an interesting leap from being like, what is this, to being like, it's the Liberty thing, you know? And that's like, so it goes from that negative to a positive. It's still being talked about. I think in that way, it's weirdly brilliant. You know, and I mean, and we've worked with that account.
Anything that disrupts the market, right? Yeah. Like they're a disruptor. So and it works fits for them, clearly.
You know, it has a little bit of seriousness to it, which fits with the fact that, like, at the end of the day, Liberty Mutual, it's insurance. It's something, it's a serious conversation. It's serious to people that have good insurance and all those other things. But the spots are humorous, you know, or they tend to be, right? They tend to be ironic,
it's funny
or wacky.
It's funny how amazing the insurance industry is, how forward thinking a lot of them are, because they're trying to take a really boring subject and make it important to people.
Make it interesting. And they do that through humor, through characters, through Yeah, I mean, it is a very, and we've worked on a number of different, I mean, I know Progressive is one of our big ones, but we've worked I worked on Geico years ago, and I have worked on Liberty Mutual. I've worked on John Hancock, and yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So we're coming to the almost end here, but I want to ask you a question about where you see the future of this going. So, I mean, we've already been through a lot of disruptions in the market. We've been through the pandemic. All of this is going remote, which is really an interesting way for all of it to happen. And it's a lot easier to do that now.
Yep.
So where do you think that's going to go? There's got to be more coming.
Yes. Well, I think I can certainly give you my thoughts. I think that, of course, there are a lot more questions than there are answers, or even like really good guesses. But, because I don't fully understand yet how AI plays into this, and I don't think anybody does. The IP of it and the concept of who owns things that are being made by AI that are creative.
That's a problem.
It's just, total gray, Wild West chaos when it comes to that. I'm not even going to try to predict where that's going to go. I've seen places where it's helpful. I see places where it cuts down on time and energy, but you still need the talent and the expertise and the ears and the writing talent and all that to really make the best stuff. I think that's not in debate. But I think, in terms of sonic branding and audio post and music, I think, I mean, I think that 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, so much of that world, especially with audio post, so record, mix, sound design, sweetening, whether it's for a commercial or a film or a TV show, so much of that happened in person. And of course, that's completely been thrown up in the air and changed, because for us, like we now have a whole arm that does audio post, and I would say 85 to 90% of it is remote, is through Zoom calls, which is crazy, but that's this new world. So I think that will continue to morph and change and create some sort of hybrid approach of, okay, when do we need to be there? When do we not need to be there? How much of that stuff is happening remotely?
Well, the tools will get better too.
The tools, absolutely. And they constantly are getting better. Yeah. I mean,
even Zoom has gotten better since the pandemic.
Absolutely. But, Source Connect being probably the big example. Yes. I mean, prior to, I remember when Source Connect first came, it was like, everybody's like, what a cool idea. But you're dropping out. There's latency issues. They're
almost ready to release 4.0.
Yeah.
Almost.
It was like, if you didn't have ISDN, as a studio, then you really had a hard time being in business, unless you were in a major market, because you'd be like, well, we're in LA, so the talent's here, or New York or the talent. But even then, they'd be like, but we want a guy in LA. Oh, well, what do? We either fly them out here or, so that's all changed, right? Of course, yourself perfectly, like VO talent is like, when we get casting specs now, part of the casting specs is, and you have Source Connect at your house in the full studio, right?
Yeah,
You're good to go.
Yeah.
We don't have to send you anywhere, right? Like, that's weird now. Like, you don't have to go to
right behind
studio. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that has already changed, but I think how that applies to the workflow is still happening.
Yes.
And I'll be interested to see how that plays out. I think, what the other thing that I find really interesting is watching, the power of social media and branding on these short form, media outlets, whether it be TikTok or YouTube Shorts or Reels. That is massively affecting everything. And so, although music is still music, it's still being made, it's still being, how it's made for those things consumed. Artists who used to be very anti-branding, now most artists are all about it because that's where they can make their money and as they should. And, you know, a lot of them are already super invested and involved with TikTok. So it's not a big leap for them to be like, sure, I'll get involved. So, you know, I mean, the whole influencer, you know, mentality is massive in that world. So, but influencer as musician, as artist, you know, I recently spoke to somebody at Coke, and, you know, he was saying that so much of what they do is just partnering with artists who are already influencers, artists that are with brands, with labels and already working in the social media sphere. I mean, that's a big shift. You know, I think that's always kind of happened, but now it's really happening in a huge way. I also think brands are going to, weirdly enough, I could see, you know, because TV is still very relevant, but like, what is TV anymore? It's kind of arguable.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
like broadcast
streaming
versus streaming.
Yeah.
But I think a lot more branded content is going to start happening. I see a lot of big brands that will start making more and more of their own episodic content, and that's going to need its own. So I think if anything, there's more opportunities than ever, in terms of creating audio and music to work with that content.
Yeah, there's a lot coming, and social media is still changing too. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
You know, Threads just came on the horizon here, and who knows if that's going to stick around. But like, there's, you know, even X, I guess, is what they're calling themselves now. I think they're working on adding other things rather than just text. So
right. Oh yeah. I'm not surprised. I mean, Elon's going to Elon, you know.
Yes.
So who knows what they're going to.
Good way to put it. Elon's going to Elon.
Who knows what they're going to come up with next? But you're right. I mean, and that's been. I remember when I first started going back to those early, 2005, 2006. Mm-hmm. You know, it was not. It's never easy. You know, it's always a hustle. But at the same time, it was like you focused on agency people, and if you can get in the door there, and you found 5, 6, 7 people that trusted you. You were in great shape, and the jobs that came in would have big budgets, and they'd have a month to work on it and do that. And, you know, now it's like you need to have 200-300 people that trust you, and this stuff's happening in a matter of hours in many cases. And it's just, so all that stuff has changed, and it will continue to, it's never going to go back to be the way that it was. Yeah. And so, you know, I know myself and all the companies I would think like me, we're just trying to adapt and understand what's going to happen next.
Yeah, there's a lot coming. I'm sure it's never ending, but yeah, I think a lot of things have changed really quickly because of the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
Way more quickly than it would have without it.
I could not agree more. And I mean, and for us as a company, I mean, I hated, you know, for all the right reasons, I hated COVID. I mean, just, it was horrendous and horrifying and so scary. And, you know, just, and for me, I'm a social person, and I like to travel, and I like to see people, and I like to spend time with my clients. And there's still people that I haven't seen since 4 years ago that I used to see all the time. And it's heartbreaking, but
we had a blip.
We had a weird, it was definitely, it was a science fiction level blip when you really think back to it.
Totally.
But the positives of that was, you know, just for example of how we're doing all this audio post work, and we have, you know, massive national clients now that hire us for all these things. And
you can work with anyone around the world.
We never would have had those opportunities unless I had opened a physical studio, hired the right talent down the street from them, and really hoped and beat the, you know, come on, you got to come over, you got to come over, you got to come over. And all this investment. And all I had to do is just, you know, find somebody to trust us to give us a shot. And we did a great job. And it's all done through Zoom calls. And I couldn't even imagine that 5 years ago. I would never have even dawned on me.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, things like that, you know, it's in our world, it was a positive. You know, it allowed us to open up a whole new arm of the company because we could. Now, the competition changed, so it's not like it's become easier now because even locally
had the same thing happen.
They're doing the same thing. So they're like, oh, we can mix with the company in LA and Toronto and whatever. You know, it's so it changed the game for everybody, but opportunities happened. And I think that, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that we were able to pivot as a company to take advantage of those opportunities in a time when, I mean, be honest, all we wanted to do is hide out in a room somewhere. It was very, very scary, but luckily everything went really well.
I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah. For voiceover, strangely enough, I had my best year in 2020. That was the weirdest thing ever because I didn't have to leave my booth, right? There wasn't any obligation for me to go to downtown Toronto, which is like an hour and a half drive away from me. So that's 3 hours out of my day back and forth where I am not able to work with clients that I was already working with remotely.
Yes.
So like most of my clients are not local at all. They're 95% of them are probably in the US. So, that no longer having an obligation to be physically present made it easier, I think, for everyone to reach out and be in touch with and collaborate with people that weren't necessarily in their local area, which I think is fantastic for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm also friends with a lot of people that are professional voiceover actors and, just the fact that, just from an audition standpoint, the amount of time saved when you don't have to constantly, go to a casting agent's facility or go to a studio. You can just do it from your house. You have an extra 10 minutes, boom, 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 boom. You have a great setup so you can just plug and play, deliver a great audition. The pain of not winning goes down at least a little bit because you didn't have to put quite as much of an investment, but you can also audition for 20 more, things or 20 times the amount of things because those opportunities are there. You can be like, I can do 50 in a day if I really want to.
You totally
because I can just do it right from here.
Yeah.
It changed everything and it will completely change things again.
Yeah. We're not going back. Yeah.
No. Oh, no.
The only thing that I miss about in-person auditions is that you don't get the booth direction. And in some instances, I'm sure, relating to what you do, you don't get that in-person direction, I guess, that sometimes you might have.
There's definitely,
there are trade-offs.
No, you're 100% right. And that especially happens with mixing and sound design because there's so many nuance to it. But what we found is that if a job starts to go sideways, we immediately set up a Zoom with everybody because we can be dealing with stuff. I mean, they're going to have to be patient and sit there but we can deal with stuff in real time instead of just, the email can, I don't know, this seems like it could be louder. And that's fine for 2 or 3 emails, but then it gets to be like, okay. Yeah. Now this is silly because we could probably solve this in 10 minutes as opposed to an entire day of emails. So, but I also think there's and this is good and bad, but there's a certain amount of compromise and understanding from the client about being like, well, maybe we can't be too nitpicky because the process is just a little bit, and I'm not just sitting in a room with them and can say, try 20 things. But I also think in some cases, the creative does suffer from that because people are just like, no, it's good. Just get it out there. And we, of course, try to make it as creative as possible. But I'm sure if we were sitting in a room together, we'd have more of a chance to play and do more interesting things and, push the envelope a little bit. We would hope.
Yeah.
Do you want to sound your absolute best when you're being interviewed on a podcast or when you're hosting your own show? I have a podcast episode and free downloadable worksheet called Sounding Your Best as a Podcast Guest off of the audiobrandingpodcast.com main page. Just click on the little square graphic to the left of the player displaying my podcast trailer. It gives you some comprehensive suggestions for where to start or for improving the sound you already have, including the type of microphones to consider and why, ideas for soundproofing your recording environment, and suggestions on how to get the best sound when you're being remotely recorded on services like Riverside FM or Squadcast. Don't let bad audio quality hold you back from being the best podcast guest or host you can be. And of course, if you happen to need voiceover for your intro and outro, feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to help. And now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, there are trade-offs, but I think this will only get better. And things like Zoom will only become easier and easier to use. And of course, we're on Riverside right now. So this is, a great way to collaborate. And there are many other things like this. So yeah, it's not going away.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
Yeah. So what are you working on right now? that you can talk about.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, shoot.
I know. I'm watching the gears go.
Yeah, because that big 60-second thing where it is a competitive job, so I can't really talk about that. But I'm very hopeful we'll win that job.
Okay.
We continue to do a ton of mixing and recording and really full and sound design for DraftKings. They've become an incredible partner of ours, and I think just yesterday we did like 15 spots. I mean, something crazy like that.
I've heard some of that audio branding, and I was really super impressed with it. So well done.
Yeah, and we've been really like just doing all of their record, mix, sound design.
Yep.
Multiple talents, multiple mini campaigns that they do. That's been really fun for us. We just did a bunch of work for Craftsman, which is out there right now. Which that was an interesting one because it's. You see a band playing live, and we had to kind of make the music that they could play live, but they weren't really musicians. So that's always an interesting
the actors,
engagement.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Hired the monkeys.
But that turned out really well. And it's basically like retro 80s, like hard rock talking about tools.
Okay.
That was a lot of fun. We just did a bunch of work with planters that just went out into the world.
Okay.
One was a cover of an old Eric Carmen song, and the other was more of an original. They wanted kind of a Wes Anderson style thing.
Oh, okay.
So we were really busy with that. But yeah, we there's definitely things happening, which is great. And I agree with, I think that assessment that I was talking to somebody earlier today that was like, boy, the beginning of this year, it was just really slow and a lot of people were panicking. I know a lot of freelance agency people right now that are like, why am I still sitting here? Like, they're really good and they're just not getting opportunities. But I am getting the sense that things are definitely picking up.
Good to
now.
hear, yeah.
I think there was definitely that big recession scare at the beginning of the year. And what's this year going to look like? And everybody was freaking out about money and spending. And I think what the brands tend to always figure out, which is wonderful, is that better marketing, mostly better, but still more and better marketing will help your bottom line.
Oh, yeah.
And,
advertising never goes away.
So exactly. So I think that I'm starting to see that now where instead of getting the like, hey, we're doing this little thing, they're coming in and saying, okay, we're going to try this bigger thing, or we're doing a campaign, or we're, this brand has been thinking about this for a year, but now they really want to go ahead and do this thing. So it's exciting. I'm feeling very positive about the fall and winter in terms of workflow. It feels like things are really picking up. People are really waking up.
Fantastic. So how can people reach out to you if they want to do that?
Oh, sure. You can always find me through the website, which is hifiproject.com. And all my information's right there. You can call me if you so choose. And you can pretty much find me across the board, on social media at, Jack Bradley Hi-Fi. It's pretty easy to find me out there. So that's the place to find us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. This has been a fantastic conversation and I've learned a ton.
Great.
Yeah.
So have I.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.